Okay, I saw the message saying we are live, so I suppose it's my turn to begin and welcome you. My name is Paweł Schreiber and I'm the least important person here. And the meeting is a collaboration between the Digital Communication Network, which is an NGO connecting digital culture professionals and digital technology professionals from different backgrounds in the service of civic society, basically. It's an international body that looks at many areas. One of these areas is also Central and Eastern Europe, and this will be one of the focuses here. This month at DCN is a special month devoted to video games. It's about serious games against disinformation. And today we're going to talk about Central and Eastern European games, which represent traumatic past or elements of the traumatic past of the region in one of the most understandable languages, internationally speaking, the language of zombies and the undead. I represent not strictly DCN. My background is academic. I come from Kazimierz Wielki University in Bydgoszcz, Poland, and I'm also a collaborator of the Indie Games Poland Foundation, which is, I think, the most important of my many personalities here. And as I said, today we're going to talk about the undead and the implications of using the undead to show or to refer to some elements of the past of Central and Eastern Europe. And before we get to the games themselves, I'd like to talk a bit about the undead themselves. There was one more speaker was supposed to be here. Unfortunately, he couldn't make it. A Polish researcher on the various undead of Central and Eastern Europe. He told me to apologize to you. His name is Łukasz Kozak, and he said I had the right to distort his views in whatever way I saw fit. So I'll try to do justice to them. He's the author of a book called Upiór Historia Naturalna, Upir, which is this kind of Eastern European term, which was later distorted as a vampire, and natural history. And this is a very important thing because I think the problem in Central and Eastern Europe is that when you bury something, it doesn't want to stay put. It gets up, it gets out of its grave, it walks around. This was a reputation Eastern Europe has had for quite some time, ever since the travelers in the 17th and the 18th century came to the region. They would hear stories about the dead getting out of their graves. Later on, some of these stories would get into Western popular culture. So we get stories about Vlad Dracula, right, living in his remote castle. But the thing with the Eastern European undead is that they were not, aristocratic vampires living in remote castles. They could be your neighbor who was buried last week, and then at night he came to visit his wife, right? Or they could be a friend of yours who'd been dead for 2 years and then started killing people, going back home drunk from the tavern. Right, so these were this was a completely different kind of undead than this kind of strange and alien vampire that you get in popular culture. The undead of Central and Eastern Europe were people who just happened to be dead, but who still lived alongside you. They were an element of everyday life. It was quite normal, right? It was a regular thing. Everybody knew about the dead walking the night. And it was not big news when somebody heard about, one person or another getting out of their grave. So they were, these undead were, or perhaps still are, quite scary on the one hand, but on the other hand, they are also an a normal element of everyday life. Some of them were quite kind, right? There are stories about upirs, these undead people getting out of their graves, and for example, coming back home to help their wives with their chores, or even sometimes having children after they were dead, right? They were trying to continue their family life. And I think this is something that that's perhaps not strictly specific to the region, but somehow I get the feeling that even though you might not believe in upirs walking around, getting out of their graves, I think right now not too many people would say they have heard about people getting out of their graves and walking around. But still, I think when you look at Central and Eastern Europe, things that are dead or things that are supposed to be dead but haven't quite died have quite a lot of influence on us. It's the memory of our ancestors, it's the memory of people we lost in wars, it's the memory of different historical traumas, it's the memory in our region of Europe, it's very often the memory of communism, right, that is still very strongly present. Communism, which is supposed to be dead, but is still sometimes a bit like the upir getting out of their grave. And this I thought was a very, very interesting thing in connection to video games. So now, yeah, now I promised we'd be getting to video games. This is the moment. I'll try to, okay. Screen sharing doesn't seem to be working very well right now. Sorry for that. Just a moment, because I seem to have a problem with. Okay, let's do it like this. This is more screen. And action. Can you see the screenshot? Yes. Okay. This is a screenshot from one of my. Perhaps I wouldn't call it a guilty pleasure. It's a game I genuinely love. It's a Ukrainian game from 2006 called You Are Empty. It was published in Eastern Europe in 2006. Its Western release was in 2007. And it's a game whose action takes place in 1955 in an alternative version of Stalinist Soviet Union. Here you can see this kind of post-apocalyptic kolkhoz, the roof of an industrial building with a suitable political slogan, right? Glory to the Communist Party of the Soviet Union. Here are the same kind of slogans. It's a game about a man waking up in a mental hospital and suddenly realizing that he's surrounded by creatures who behave like zombies. But the thing is, the creatures are basically characters from Soviet propaganda posters, right? So it's a steelworks worker, it's a heroic nurse, they're heroic soldiers, sometimes soldiers from a time long past, right? From the time right after the Soviet Revolution. You can see that the soldier here is not quite fresh, right? This one has spent some time in his grave apparently until 1955. And apart from the lovely sceneries, I don't know if the screenshots do justice to the beauty of the game, but it's quite amazing on the level of how it uses architecture, especially the Soviet architecture. But it also has the plot is no masterpiece, but I think it's very significant. There's this city in which the action takes place, and the problem with the city is that it was victim to an experiment. There is a tower, a huge tower nearby with a huge red star on top of it, which basically controls the minds of the people around it and tries to turn them into superhumans, exactly into these characters from Soviet propaganda posters, right? And of course, as you might expect, as it usually happens in video games like this, something went wrong, right? But and these people controlled by the star are kind of in between life and death, right? They're no longer fully alive. Some of them seem to have been dead for some time, just like this soldier. And they definitely are not in control of themselves. So functionally, they behave like zombies, right? There is something of death in them. Just like an upir, they are both alive and dead. This is another example from a Polish game called Gorky 17. I think there are several versions of it. Gorky 17 was the Polish title. I think the English title was Odium. Right now it functions as Gorky 17 on Steam and on GOG. So apparently this is the name that stuck. And it is a Polish game, which takes a very Polish perspective. There is an old former Soviet base in Poland, and there's something weird going on there. And apparently there are some weird experiments performed there, and they turn people into mutants. And you can see one such mutant here, right? So there's this sinister presence of the past, the communist past during which the Soviet army was present in Poland, and this past, which was supposed to be buried, re-emerges as in the form of these strange mutants or strange mutagens, which later on get out. And of course, as I said, it's a very Polish perspective, so it was, I think, published right before Poland was joining NATO. So there's a Polish soldier here cooperating with NATO soldiers. And to make things even funnier, I think there was in the Russian version, in the Russian localization of the game, there are no NATO soldiers. There are just Russian soldiers exploring an old Soviet base, right? So the location of the game was general enough so that you could just switch the sides. But anyway, there's this weird Soviet past re-emerging as something monstrous. Here, in a moment I'll be presenting my guests, and this comes from a series of games very strongly linked to one of our guests, Oleksii Sytianov, who worked. Hello, this is Oleksii. Yeah, who worked on the S.T.A.L.K.E.R series, and actually you could say Oleksii did a hat trick in terms of post-apocalyptic, post-Soviet video games, because he worked on the S.T.A.L.K.E.R franchise, he worked on the Metro franchise. Right now he's working on Chernobylite, which is also a game more or less in the same vein. Also Servarium, right? Which yes, was a multiplayer game based on the same kind of universe. So here's probably one of the world's most foremost experts on such games, one of the main designers and the main writers on the S.T.A.L.K.E.R franchise. S.T.A.L.K.E.R was an extremely popular and is an extremely popular series. The third part of the game is or the next part of the game. It's complicated to number the parts actually, because frankly speaking, this will be the fourth part, right? I think yes. Yes. It's been announced, and it was one of the more interesting things promised at the E3 trade fair, which has just ended. S.T.A.L.K.E.R is a game which is kind of based on the brother Strugatsky's novel, The Roadside Picnic. It's also kind of refers to Andrei Tarkovsky's famous film, but it goes its own way, and it's a game about the Chernobyl area. And here, this comes from the third part, Call of Pripyat, and you see parts of the city of Pripyat there. And it's about the area about Chernobyl, around Chernobyl, becoming at some point this weird land filled with different anomalies, mysterious phenomena, and also, of course, different monsters and mutants. And spoiling the first Stalker game a bit, the ultimate mystery is very similar to that in You Are Empty. There is a special machine called the Brain Scorcher, which controls the minds of the people around, and it puts them in a kind of zombie-like condition, right? Destroying their minds and taking control over their minds. The next game I wanted to show to you is a very recent game. It's 2021, HROT by the Czech indie creator Sytianov. And it's again a game about an alternative 1986. It's right after the Chernobyl disaster. Something very bad has happened, so you can see what it did to the local law enforcement. They are like these mutant zombies from S.T.A.L.K.E.R. You get all the lovely ugliness of communist Czechoslovakia here, with some authentic locations from Prague. And you also get quite a lot of political undertones. From time to time, you get pictures of President Husak. You may kiss them, right, giving your respects to the president. And spoiler, the final boss of the first episode of the game is the mummy of Klement Gottwald, right? The communist Czechoslovakian leader, a mummy which apparently has become a zombie, and the final confrontation is with a kind of weird zombie spider attached to this mummy of Klement Gottwald. I think generally, if you talk about upirs, all the mummies of the communist leaders are a wonderful example here, right? People who should be dead, but they're not quite dead. So here they imagined Klement Gottwald as a full-time mutated zombie monster, which is wonderful in itself. And I really recommend that you play all of these games I mentioned here. Okay, and now I'll stop sharing my screen, and now we can talk about the games themselves. But before we get to that, I'd like to introduce my guests for today. I've already mentioned Oleksii Sytianov. Another guy I'd like you to look at is Yaraslau I, who was the founder of the Belarusian Game Development Association. He's both a game developer and an academic, with an extremely long CV in terms of both publications and games he's worked on. And Alexey Furman is a Ukrainian developer who, apart from working in different companies, also does some work on his own. Work which, interestingly enough, has its background in his journalistic past. Alexey used to be a photojournalist, documenting, among other things, the Maidan revolution. As a result of that, at some point he created a VR application, Euromaidan VR, which was a kind of documentary exploration of the Maidan. Now that you know our speakers, first, perhaps I'd like to start with a very basic question. Why do we in Eastern Europe like post-apocalyptic settings so much?
I can try to answer your questions. No, first, we survived our great experiment Soviet Union, and we have our apocalypse at the end of the Soviet Union. So it kind of post-Soviet territory lives in a post-apocalyptic of communism era, kind of. And survival aspects also very important because we understand this, because we had so much of this kind of events when we need to survive in kind of post-apocalyptic events after Soviet Union fall and so on.
Yes, Alexey?
Yeah, you know, I've been thinking about this today, and in photojournalism, there's this concept called impending death, and it's about how photojournalists around the world capture not the death itself, but people that are severely wounded just before dying. And I think because, you know, many creators today were born in the 70s and the 80s, I think, you know, these people and, you know, us growing us in the 90s, I guess, as well, we're living in the world where there was an impending death of the regime. So we were always sort of expecting things to crumble. And I think when Chernobyl happened in 1986, sort of the whole image of the world just, you know, started to collapse. And in a way, I think, you know, the collapse, as Alexey just said, the collapse of the country that you live in, it is an apocalypse. So in a way, today we're living in a post-apocalyptic world. And actually, USSR was a post-apocalyptic world as well, because another apocalypse happened in 1917. So, you know, in the past century, we've been through several of these apocalypses, and we're now living in a post-apocalyptic world.
Yaraslau, anything to add?
Well, yes. First of all, I'd like to say about the game You Are Empty. According to the end, all this apocalypse was just to create one person who would be the perfect leader of the world. And there was also a time machine. It's the ending is the best part about this game, probably. Others.
I love the game. I really love the game. But as I said, it's a bit of a guilty pleasure.
Yes, it's a trash lovers game. Yes. So the thing is, it's a metaphor also. The main character, it's like a struggle against the system of mindless people, and the struggle of the system to control, as Alexey mentioned before. Yes. Oh, it's easy for me. I can just say once or twice. Okay. Indeed, it's the experiment did not adhere to the changes of the world. They invented a stable system, but it couldn't be changed to be coordinated with evolution of humanity around them. So they were, even though at one point they were almost industrial as others, but they were behind. And yes, we had a couple of apocalypses. Yes, the turnover of everything people knew in 1917. Then the World War II also broke a lot of doors because people finally met foreigners and they formed stable relationships, and also ethics returned into, I mean, science didn't have ethics because it was all changed. But so because it was crumbling, our science fiction writers and game designers as well, they were fantasizing about how far a system could go, totalitarian regime could go to control people and to suppress free will, someone who stands up to them. So in Oleksii S.T.A.L.K.E.R, he's the element of freedom, like he's like a free person, and that was the ultimate struggle. I mean, people put on the two sides of the scale monolith, like ultimate zombification of the character, and the freedom, the group which S.T.A.L.K.E.R himself is the ultimate manifestation. And as Alexey usually says in his interviews, I'm sorry, I would quote Oleksii Sytianov, the main character in S.T.A.L.K.E.R, for example, becomes, I mean, it's just the most flexible opportunity out of all mentioned games, that the main character becomes what you make of it. So it's like the ultimate manifestation of freedom. And the ending is, yes. So indeed, and that what we see now in some societies, for example, what we survive, the ultimate control over the media, the absurd decisions, absurd experiments. Yeah.
I think it's significant because even the opening of the game, of the first S.T.A.L.K.E.R, the main character is somebody who got very close to this mind controlling machine, which would normally destroy him, but he returns intact somehow, right? He doesn't remember who he is. He has some problems, but generally he's the only figure who survived close contact with this machine, which normally, or with this installation, which normally fries people's brains and either kills them or zombifies them. So yes, this idea, it's I think it's right now. I mean, if he were American, he should be called Gordon Freeman, right? Because it's a telling name like this. But yeah, there's definitely something to it. Yeah, I you know, this I'm happy you kind of confirm my intuition, because it was something of an idea of mine, but I wasn't sure to what extent, you know, being an outsider, because the Polish experience of the fall of communism was still very much different than the experience of the collapse of the Soviet Union from within. But I also had the impression sometimes that in games like S.T.A.L.K.E.R, that they're actually very strongly based on facts, right? That they actually describe a world people have lived through, only slightly, you know, metaphoricized, but basically showing this kind of collapse of a world, and of a society and of an empire, and of something that was, I think, trying to be a whole universe for its citizens, right? Because when you live in a totalitarian regime, or when you want to be a good totalitarian leader, the first thing is to create the impression that you are the whole universe, that there is nothing apart from you. And then when your universe is destroyed, what do you do, right? Of course, I'm not saying that this was the experience of the basic experience of the citizens of the former Soviet Union, but I think for many it was like this, right? The whole universe collapsed, and what do we do now? Right, so one of the answers would be Eastern Europe loves post-apocalyptic settings because it's home, right? Because it's where we live to a stronger or lesser extent. Now perhaps a question to Oleksii Sytianov. To what extent did you think about these political aspects and historical aspects when creating S.T.A.L.K.E.R? Was this your intention from the very start to create this kind of, because right now we're talking about the game basically as a metaphor of the downfall of the Soviet Union. Was it your original intention, or was it something that just kind of happened?
No, first of all, I work with team, and when I go to the company and start working on S.T.A.L.K.E.R, they already had this idea to make an S.T.A.L.K.E.R game. It kind of aliens from space, and like Half-Life, not open world at all. But when we start thinking about Chernobyl, use setting of Chernobyl, it's like came together, because it's like the Chernobyl was very symbolic accident for Soviet Union, and I hear some ideas that Chernobyl event is killing Soviet Union, because it's like showing how nihilistic was Soviet Union, how what they do with people of Soviet Union. It's very cynical. And so, I want to make a story that was very true, very realistic. Or our style, it's like realistic science fiction with some mystic aspects. And the Soviet Union collapsing, the zone itself, it's interesting that zone also in Russian, it's also a prison. And our social structure in Soviet Union, it's kind of prison. It's we call it like it's a prison of nations, Soviet Union. And after collapsing, we have like these zones, anomalous mind control devices. What we have after Soviet Union collapsed, and a lot of people in Soviet Union have power because of the Soviet Union. My mother told me that about KGB agents. He told me if you group, work team, or kind of has 10 people, one of them was KGB agent. So you can imagine the atmosphere, trust between the people. And we live in like, no one believes in government. Government is evil. And we need to trust just friends or so on, but we need to find the way to trust and kind of, so it's lots of this problem. I don't find like we have one solution, we want to speak about Soviet Union. No, we just like put so much that we have. And I understand that when I write part of this, it's unconscious for me. I just feel it and I see it like this. I put it, I feel resonance, and I think, okay, if I feel resonance, this has power. So I need to put this like this. Maybe I understand this later. Sometimes it's happened.
Okay, so an intuitive writing process. Okay, and anything to add from anyone here? Yaraslau? Yeah.
Well, to add, yes, indeed, it was also like a metaphor of survival. We'll look at all the games mainly beside Gorky 17, because it's both Soviet part was created by localizators, Snowball and Goblin. Yeah. They even created new characters, making a good localization. But everyone else were surviving, so maybe these games are famous as well because the survival. It also like S.T.A.L.K.E.R as well. One of the locomotives genre, which started this genre and maybe survival element. Also, it's interesting how it is put. Usually, in post-Soviet games, we try to break. Our main character is fighting against the odds, against system or systems, different like groups. Also, it's interesting how in United States, the other way around, usually people are showing their position, for example, as Truman Show, their position of one person to public opinion. The public is the leader. And also the books like Fahrenheit, for example, they also show the dictatorship of public opinion, and we have dictatorship of few certain people who decided to change the world, and they know the best, and they have the zombies, yes, mindless subjects.
Okay, yes, they create zombies. I wonder to what extent it's. I think it's kind of. We had this little intervention here, but I suppose one of the theses of this intervention, which unfortunately we had to remove anyway, was that I think it was, in a way, it was in tune with what we were talking about, It was all about the past being reborn, or the dead past somehow, either re-emerging or still being present in the world. I think it was very much, perhaps not that much in tune with S.T.A.L.K.E.R, but definitely in tune with Metro, right? And with the communist and the Nazis in Metro, right? It's like this land ravaged by the Second World War, and this particularly cruel and horrifying section of the Second World War. That it's all of this past is buried in a shallow grave, right? And whenever something happens, it will get out, right? This is what happens in Metro. For those of you who haven't played the game or read the novels, Metro is a series of, first it was a series of novels by a writer called Dmitry Gluchowski, and it's about a time after a nuclear apocalypse, where right now it's a multinational franchise with people from many different countries writing novels about their parts of the world, but it originated in Moscow, in the Moscow metro, in the Moscow subway. People are hiding from the radiation on the surface, and they form different factions, and one of these factions is a Nazi faction, and another faction is a communist faction. So it's like, the Second World War in Russia, in the Soviet Union, all over again. And to what extent do you get this feeling of because you when you live in the former Soviet Union, to a lesser extent when you live in Poland, but I think also you live on the dead body of a huge creature, or of a huge monster, however you prefer to call it. To what extent does this body still do you still feel this undead presence, right? Because I think this is one of the crucial experiences of Eastern Europe, that the past is sometimes much more alive here than in some other places. Perhaps because Alexey Furman, I mean, there was quite a lot of talk about S.T.A.L.K.E.R. Oleksii and Yaraslau are experts on S.T.A.L.K.E.R, and you're actually working on a book about S.T.A.L.K.E.R, right? So we could kind of make an early promotion of that, so you can expect something interesting coming up in the future. But Alexey, how do you feel about this, as especially as a former journalist, as someone who still kind of moves on the boundary of journalism?
Yeah, we were talking about the dead, right? The dead in Eastern Europe. I think one of the reasons for the dead to emerge is that I think we have a problem with parting with the dead. We are so clingy to our past in many ways. We are clinging to, and we don't want to release this hold of the people that we spend so much time with, speaking about our neighbors, our relatives, the things that you mentioned. And it's hard for us to release hold of the things and the world that we lived in. I spent the whole morning today moving my grandmother's old furniture from her old apartment to our dacha. And, it's just furniture. In terms of, economic value, it's old, it's crap. But this is the memory, of the times that, that my mother has. This is what has value. So this is how she is still clinging to the past that she had when she was a young girl in the Soviet Union. And I'm helping her in a way, like in that movie where the Berlin Wall fell, and the guy is still buying things for his mother to sort of reinforce the idea that the Berlin Wall is still there. So something along these lines.
Goodbye Lenin, right?
Yeah, Goodbye Lenin. I think it's an amazing movie worth mentioning in our discussion, because in a way for our parents that are, you know, that spent a lot more time in the Soviet Union than we did. I think sometimes we, you know, we sort of, we need to help them sort of find their way in today's world, and you know, build bridges and so on, and explain to them how this world functions. But yeah, I'd say it's hard. I'd say it's hard, and people have a hard time adjusting to the modern world, especially the ones who spend so much time in the Soviet Union. And yeah, I think in a way it was the hardest for the generation that was born in the 80s, because they witnessed some of that, and then the world rapidly changed. And I would say I've witnessed a generation that has a hard time adjusting, and, you know, finding this foundation for, you know, for life, finding a foundation to build you know, the ideas on. And it's I guess it's a little easier for the 90s kids in Eastern Europe, because I was born in October, so 2 months after Ukraine became independent. I haven't lived in a different world, but you know, then again, I all the time see people that are referring to this dead, to this monster that you have mentioned, not like something that they are happy they buried, but to something that they're very, very sad they buried. So they are still clinging to that monster, and you know, actually recalling the times when the monster was alive with happiness, because it just so happened then that when the monster was alive, they were young, and, you know, the world for them was maybe a lot more vibrant, and, you know, maybe a better place. So this coincided, and yeah, it's just how it is. And a lot of the myths that the Russian propaganda is using today is sort of you know, juxtaposing the bad world that we are building now with the great world that was there. And that's how Russian propaganda was so powerful in Ukraine in 2014 when the war started, is that they were basically emphasizing the idea that the world the sort of the system that Ukraine was trying to build was bad. And the world that was then, that was, you know, a long time ago, is better. And they promised people this myth of rebuilding this world. But, you know, as we know, it's very, very hard. And I guess better to say impossible to resurrect the dead.
When you mentioned Goodbye Lenin, I remembered a lovely story, which is a kind of very, very delicate, but also quite moving and quite touching example of this nostalgia and this attempt to visit the dead. There's this in East Berlin. There used to be this big amusement park, which was the thing in East Germany. You know, with a huge Ferris wheel, just like the one in Pripyat. So it was very impressive. And then it no longer brought any profit. And after the unification, it functioned for some time, but then it was abandoned. And at some point, several years ago, an elderly woman wanted to revive her memories. So she went there, she got through the fence, she got on the Ferris wheel, and there was a really heavy wind on that day. So what happened was the Ferris wheel actually moved, and she went up, and she started crying for help. And finally they had to, you know, call the fire brigade and get her back. And of course, you know, when they asked her, what the hell were you doing there? She said, oh, it was so nice when I was young. I wanted to experience it once more. So, you know, if we're talking about iconic Ferris wheels, you have the one in Pripyat, but you also have one in Berlin with these memories of old. Okay, when I think about these images of the monstrous Eastern Europe, it's something that's. Oh, Alex, you wanted to say something, or?
Yeah, I want to add something about fascism, communism. You can kill leaders, you can kill people, you even can kill undead creature, but you can't kill idea behind them. So this is immortal. So in every times will be people who want to make something very simple. We try to control, kill the bad guys, and we live happily. So it's return to us, and I think this is the key problem.
Perhaps this is the most difficult kind of upir to get rid of, right?
Yeah, ideology. And we live in information era, so we vulnerable for this.
Alexey, you wanted to?
Yeah, I was about to say that it's reverse engineering Svetlana Alexievich, I think, quote when she said, "Don't kill people, kill ideas." About, you know, I guess about the whole 20th century, pretty much.
Yes, but if you try to kill ideas, sometimes you kill it to
make a martyr out of it. Martyr, mučenika, martyr.
Yeah, but also some ideas like people simple, like I don't want to thinking too much about this, so that's why I like the kind of ideology like fascism. And when you criticize this, I don't hear you. It's too complicated for me. So I believe the part of humanity always be like this. You can kill this idea. And right now with like fake news and kind of the same, one people believe they right, other people believe no, they don't right. And I don't think we have exit from this.
Yeah, because there was a very specific set of instructions what you should do when there's an upir walking the night, right? You find their grave, you turn them face down, you beat them with your shovel on the backside. If this doesn't help you, there are different prayers. You cut off their head, for of course. So there was stuff you could do. When nothing helped, you would burn them, right? And upir with no body, or a body consisting of information, is much more difficult, you could say, to deal with. And it's also this neighbor of ours that we have to get used to, right? Or perhaps we don't have to, but we somehow function with sometimes ludicrous lies floating around. And you know, you can't really help it. You say it's a lie. It's like, you know, you point across at it, you take out your garlic, you say, let's be rational. It's obviously a lie. Look, here's evidence, and nothing helps, right? This dead body still comes back and determines how you function and who you are, right? And probably I think it's also a universal problem. Of course, it's extreme when you think today about places such as Belarus, especially if we talk about places where our guests come from today, where basically the spirit of the good old kolkhoz is you know, is refusing to go down. But I think it's also a universal thing, and I think this is also something Oleksii mentioned when he was talking about S.T.A.L.K.E.R, that it's not a game that's a strictly local thing, right? That it's a game that also has a universal appeal, and I think this is what's most valuable in such examples of globalized culture. When you think about franchises such as The Witcher, or such as the S.T.A.L.K.E.R or The Witcher, for instance, their strength lies in the fact that the things happening in these games are not identified as, or the metro for that matter, not identified as something exotic and local, but they have become part of global culture, right? And it's, you know, it's the Chernobyl of Stalker, the Chernobyl of Chernobylite, and the Chernobyl of Call of Duty Modern Warfare are the same place, right? It's a place of the universal global imaginarium, and I think this is particularly valuable, right? When you have a monster that haunts you, a good thing is to not to pretend that it's just your monster, it's everybody's monster, right? It's a universal monster. And this is something that leads us probably to our last subject for today, and perhaps then we'll have some, if we do have some questions from the audience. There's this very long-lived image of Eastern Europe as a place where all sorts of monstrous things happen, right? When you look at travel accounts of people going to, Western Europeans going to Eastern Europe and then crossing the Polish border, this is where the horrible things start. And then when they get to Russia, oh my God, right? And they find the nastiest things they can, and they know it will definitely impress their audiences, right? So this is the place where all the terrible things happen, where all people are cruel and barbaric. And then then of course we have the stories about the vampires who somehow, well, not always, but in the beginning they of course originate from Eastern Europe. And right now, even if you look, I don't know, if you go to Resident Evil, the latest part, right, we again get back to the Romanian context, right? Eastern Europe is where the horrible things happen. To what extent do you think all of these games showing the monstrous Eastern Europeanness, to what extent are they our voice, and to what extent are they the kind of voice we expect to appeal to the Western audience, right? Or to what extent do we allow ourselves to be viewed in such a way, right? That yes, this is where the monsters are, right? Yeah, we buried my grandfather and he comes back from the dead every 2 weeks. The sort of anecdote to impress the tourists. How do you view this? Would you view this as an example of you know, kind of self-colonization?
Who will be speaking first? Can I start?
I think so, yeah.
Okay. To my point of view, we just use media, which is expected from us sometimes, to help people to hear us and to understand us. Of course, we have this expression, cranberry, so to say. A cranberry is something in Russian language called like exaggerated image of the Western Europe. Yes. So we actually, indeed, we judge it, but we use it to meet expectations and to transfer the message, which could be which could be very universal, as Oleksii Sytianov mentioned. There's nothing new to the West about a challenge, about significance of the personality of one person. And it's also a struggle of all countries to a struggle against the system, rage against the machine and everything. And it's a constant, never-ending battle because life doesn't stop. A lot of processes go on, and the system oppresses, and a lot of personalities, they return the significance of a single person. And it's like in court, it's like persecution and defense. It's a constant battle which shows the truth, and truth somewhere in between. And this why we're not that much different. We just use we have also opportunity to integrate these stereotypes more naturally because we feel the setting better than our Western Europe. It's very rare that someone not from the area actually shows something from here. It's like what with Ghost of Tsushima was fascinating, that people not Japanese made a game about Japan, and it's a high occasion game development. Usually, yeah, but sometimes happens you are empty. Yeah.
Oh, I mean, we'll have to talk someday about the loveliness of this game.
I want to add about the setting, the Eastern setting. It's very exotic in science fiction, because we have lots of science fiction about America, Japan, but I have friends, Americans, who play Stalker. And I ask them, why, what do you find in this game? And he tell me, we scare about Soviet Union, we scare nuclear war. A lot of time we scare this, and no one knows what happened in Soviet Union, how it looks. And Chernobyl setting or Eastern Europe post-apocalyptic setting, it's kind of, it shows how it look. And you feel, and you can meet your own projection about American propaganda and so on. So you can see these people, and I believe that it's important to make game like Stalker when we like present themselves, how we are open-hearted people, how we communicate, how we help each other. We're not evil communist guys. We like all people on this planet. And one interesting aspect of this, it's like Ukraine and post-Soviet, Ukraine, Poland, it's like between East and West. We integrate these cultures. So they different, it's very different. So we have own way of living and own mindset, Slavic kind of. I speak with Janae Weinhold, is American psychologist, and she loves Ukraine. She loves Slavic people because they so open-hearted. In America, she say, like, if you have like broken relation, it's simpler to move another city, but not work with this. And they don't want to go deep. In Slavic culture, we love to, if we like people, we open and we speak about very deep, many things.
Okay, yes. Alexey, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, I think I actually I agree with everything that was said, but at the same time, I think it is important for Ukrainian developers to work with the new narratives, because just have a look at what we're doing now. 4A is probably doing another Metro. GSC is doing Stalker 2. I guess we have to stop at some point, and produce something new, because I think it's important to have this versatility to talk about anything in the world, about parts of our history, and maybe about parts of another countries or part of the world's history. And I think that would truly make Ukrainian game development sort of a global player in the world arena. I think I work at Frogwares. It's a studio that is famous for the Sherlock Holmes franchise and for the Sinking City. And I think, in a way, Frogwares is a good example, because Ukrainians are doing games about Lovecraft, and the games are good, and people love them. And I just think we could try delving more into our history, producing games about Cossack times, about Kievan Rus. Ukrainian history is super rich with the narratives that we could work with. or, you know, just work with anything. And, you know, that would enrich ourselves. And I guess that would, you know, play to the, in the end, I think that would play positively in our image, because in a way, while we're still doing these local narratives, we will be pursued as, you know, as, I guess, local creators in a way. You know, maybe this is the parallel that is forcefully drawn, but I worked as a photojournalist for many years, and as a documentarian, as a photojournalist, I would often hear from foreign colleagues traveling the world and covering conflict everywhere, you know, South America, Africa. They would travel and travel. They would always tell me, Alexey, you have to work on your local stories. It's so important for you to, you know, to get to that, you know, be this great photographer who works locally and does these local stories. But, you know, I think we have to make one step forward and become, you know, international storytellers, both in journalism and in game development. So yeah.
Yaraslau, I think you wanted to say something, and yes.
Yeah.
And then Oleksii.
This question is, I've studied it for a long time. First of all, I don't think Ukrainians have to leave the narratives they already have, because it's a very rare occasion that the country has their national identity in games and actually can be identified. You should not lose it. And I can assure that, knowing Ukrainian game industry, in Ukraine, you have hundreds of companies, and indies quite a lot more than, even though we have hundreds of companies in Belarus, but personal PC games and console games are made more in many times more in Ukraine, and you have a lot of games made, other type of games. It just they weren't that successful, maybe, and also maybe because games about national identity, which you're talking about, they have to be catered to the locals, and they are not acknowledged yet as customers. When you select audience, when you create a game, you don't think that much about Ukraine or Belarus as audience. And you, as Ukrainians, you already have expectation, and it's a great achievement of national game development to have a certain style, certain type of narrative. By the way, Frogwares is famous also with the thing that only they in whole world can make games about Sherlock Holmes. I have no idea how they got this IP, how they got these rights. I mean, this British classical novel, but they only in the world. Anyone can do movies or whatever, but games only Frogware can make. So that's number two for those who know. So it's a huge achievement. Others are followed, and if you go, like, for example, to Games Gathering, it's a lot. Yes, time will pass until our countries, more Eastern countries, will have something like Kingdom Come Deliverance, just like Daniel Vavra and Martin Klima made with Warhorse. It's a game about Czech Republic, for Czech Republic, and the whole world, made by Czech, with 50 PhDs creating the historical accuracy and fighting off politically correctness. And it's something to inspire us all. But before that, he made Mafia, and how many Mafias? They were making XCOM. They were making so many other games. Their industry is one of the most developed in Eastern Europe. And I mean, after Poland, probably Czech Republic is one of the most developed. On more than 15 years, Czech Republic has their own association. And even though, and some of the biggest conferences in Brno and Prague, and in Kiev, you still work a lot with Russia. So in Ukraine, you still don't have National Association of Game Development, because people still survive. And that's why these games about survival are still a good thing about Ukraine, because they still make them from the heart. It's still survival. It's war in Ukraine. And this survival is pretty strong. And probably also it's a huge metaphor because all the world wanted to simplify the moral, just like in these games, and do with the regime, with sect, with ideology, what main character does with the subject. Just kill them, bash them, smash them, burn them, do whatever, just simply, and you know what you have to do. You have to kill them and go through. And that what happens now in Ukraine. It's a huge mixture of people don't know what to believe, who's right, who's wrong. Part of Ukraine is under difficult circumstance. It doesn't know they're Russian or Ukrainian. It's difficult. So probably this why these games are more related to, I mean, more expressionate maybe would be, because they have something real to be poured in, some real feeling. But maybe I'm wrong. I mean, what Alexey, Alexey have to say?
I want to add about trauma healing and epigenetics aspect, and why these kind of projects very important from my point of view. It's kind of we need to calm down our restless dead. So this is a topic of releasing the traumas of generations that we have in our history, wars, genocides, and so on, and controlling. In that, relieving these thems that have not been lived out and displaced. And when we work with games with these themes, so the healing happens. This is trauma healing effect. It's healing is through accepting, living with, and realizing all these feelings that are displaced. That's, I think, why it's important, these themes, because a lot of people like closed to these feelings, don't accept this. This why the dead come back. The symbol of the dead, it's symbol of trauma.
Okay, I think we've gone beyond our scheduled time, but we still have one question from the audience. What advice would you give for creators thinking about creating games like this that can be used as a tool against disinformation, especially with revised histories and for media literacy? Do these games have to be PC or console based? So any advice on how to fight disinformation, especially, you know, revising or distorting history with video games?
Well, just tell a story as, and it is. We will see. On August there will be a game jam dedicated to lessons of Belarus. It's attempt, by the way, to do exactly what this question is about, to tell a story and to somehow reflect, as Alexey mentioned, to put some of the rotation, some of aggression into of helplessness, so to say, into game development to show the world what's going on. And that's actually, we'll see how it works. Just attract good specialists to the project, have mentor. As Brenda Romero, she's the wife of John Romero, great game developer, and she got a lot of prizes, women in game dev, and she was working on Jagged Alliance, on Wizardry series, and many. She likes to say that if you want to make something good, you need to find a mentor or a teammate with whom you feel comfortable creating, and also, and then just create and go to conferences, show to people, get opinions. If you want to like connect with Alexey or Alexey and show them, get their opinion, they will help you with something. I mean, you just need to do. I mean, secret of creation is just doing, not sitting, but doing, and inviting people to help. That's the main idea, finding a way to work.
Okay, do we have any other questions from the audience? Yes. Okay.
Simple.
You wanted to? Okay. Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah, I hear it like you want to speak true with this age of disinformation, but you need to find right information, and you need to work with your self-deception, self-delusions. You need to understand how can you make game without propaganda. The propaganda can be good also, like Walt Disney kind of propaganda. So you need to understand this and find the way to speak the truth.
I guess I'd like to quickly add that don't be afraid to be cross-disciplinary, because I guess at the intersection of disciplines, a lot of interesting things happen. We, in Aftermath VR Euromaidan, the virtual reality project that you mentioned, we use documentary images and video, and we juxtaposed them to a photogrammetry that we did of downtown Kiev. And in such a way, we used documentary material in a virtual world that was also a real world. So I'd say because propaganda is very often delivered with documentary imagery, I think it's not a bad idea to then use this documentary imagery in a virtual world, but explain how the perception of the viewers was altered, maybe with false description or with the video montage. But there are all these things, how imagery can be manipulated. But yeah, being cross-disciplinary in video games, I think is a great feat.
Okay. Thank you all for your participation. It was a lovely discussion, and thanks. First of all, thank you to both Alexeys, and a special thank you to Yaraslau, who's kind of the co-organizer here, because when he joined the team, he actively started looking for some other speakers, and it's thanks to Yaraslau that Oleksii Sytianov could join us. So thank you very much, Yaraslau, for your help. And basically, as we saw game developers here, we're waiting for the stuff you're working on. So Alexey, the next Sherlock Holmes game, Oleksii, Chernobylite, which is kind of almost out because it's in early access. So you can play it right now, but the final version is coming up. And Yaraslau is involved in lots of projects, Chernobylite as well, right? You also did some work on Chernobylite.
The latest announced project, which I was part of, is replaced by the
Yes.
Z-Cat Studios. It was announced also at E3.
Yes,
by Microsoft. Yes.
So if you saw the most beautiful pixel art game at E3, the one that really made waves with its trailer, then it's also Yaroslaw's doing. So there's really a lot to look forward to. So thank you guys for your participation, and thank you for the great games you have been making and we have been playing. Thank you to all of our audience, and see you again at other Digital Communication Network events. Thank you. Bye.